Hello and welcome. I'm Christian Bryan in Washington. Abortion is on the docket once again for the U.S. Supreme Court. At the center of this new case, mifepristone, a pill that's used in nearly 2/3 of all abortions in the U.S. And the outcome could have some serious implications for women across the nation. Early tomorrow, the justices will begin reviewing the FDA's rules for dispensing mifepristone. They could rule to revoke the drug's FDA approval or restrict distribution of the drug. That's the fear for advocates of safe, legal abortions. They say it would have a big impact not only on access to medication abortions, but also on the drug industry as a whole, and even the authority of federal agencies. As the justices deliberate in the courtroom, there will almost certainly be some activity outside the Supreme Court building, including, quote, robots dispensing abortion pills to anyone who wants them. The bots will be operated remotely from shield law states where there's legislation in place meant to protect abortion rights. Oral arguments are set to begin tomorrow morning. Legal Affairs correspondent Anushay Hossain has more on what we can expect as the case unfolds before the High Court.
Hey, good evening to you, CB. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court will be hearing arguments tomorrow on a drug that is used in abortions. And this is one of the first major abortion cases to make it back to the High Court since a majority of the justices overturned Roe v. Wade. The medication at issue here is called mifepristone. It is one of a two-drug regimen that is used in abortions in the United States. And it's used in a majority of the abortions in the U.S. And there is a group of conservative doctors who is against this drug. They believe that some changes that the FDA made a few years ago could potentially put women's lives at risk if they take this drug. Back in 2016 and 2021, the FDA started to loosen restrictions in order to broaden access to this drug. People no longer needed in-person visits in order to be prescribed the drug. It didn't have to be a doctor who would write those prescriptions. It could be other medical professionals. And mifepristone could be used up to 10 weeks into a pregnancy as opposed to 7 weeks into the pregnancy. These conservative doctors believed that these steps could potentially make it more dangerous for women who are taking this drug when they want to have an abortion done. This drug has been on the market for more than 2 decades, and the FDA, along with the drug maker, have argued in their filings that it is safe, and they made these changes after rigorous studies and many evaluations of how these drugs actually work. The decision could come sometime in June, but depending on how the justices rule here, women could continue to have this sort of access to the drug where they could potentially get it in the mail, or there could be limitations. We just have to wait to see what the justices decide with this particular matter. The arguments start at 10 in the morning. I will be inside the High Court tomorrow, CB, to hear the arguments that are made on both sides.
All right, that was Anushay Hossain. We look forward to hearing more from her. If the justices do rule to tighten access to mifepristone, what will that look like for women in America? Let's dive in. Joining me now to look ahead here is Anushay Hossain. She's a women's health researcher and women's health rights advocate, and she's the author of the book, The Pain Gap, How Sexism and Racism in Healthcare Kill Women. Anushay, good to have you. I'm hoping we can use this conversation to really give audiences some understanding on reproductive health and what might come out of the Supreme Court case. So for starters, what is it mifepristone is used for, and how widespread is its use?
Thanks so much for having me, and that's a very important question. So mifepristone is one of the 2 abortion pills that is used to do an abortion, and basically, since 2023, this way of using abortion pills, mifepristone, has been incredibly common, not popular, but common. About 2/3 of all abortions in 2023 were taken by these medications. And what's really important about the Supreme Court hearing is that it's just one more step to really limit women's access to safe and rare abortion, because what's important is that women are still going to be having their abortions. It's just about making sure that they are safe and accessible.
Yeah, we'll get into the continued rise of abortions across the nation. But let's focus on the Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court ruling in FDA v. Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine could have wide-ranging effects across the nation, even in places where voters opted to protect abortion access. This is something we saw last year. Can you give us a sense of what all is at stake here?
Exactly. Well, you know what? This is the biggest reproductive health rights case that the Supreme Court has heard since overturning Roe. And I think what's really important to remember is that it's not only just about limiting choice for women, but abortion is healthcare. And also this case is showing that, the whole thing that the court said about it's going to go back to the states is not what's going to happen. It's actually going to make reproductive health services even more difficult and delayed for women to access. And as you know, abortion and women's health is a huge election year issue. It is front and center for the Biden campaign. So you can be sure that people are watching this case and what happens tomorrow.
Yeah. According to the Guttmacher Institute, a reproductive rights think tank, abortions have been on a steady incline over the last few years, even as the Supreme Court overturned Roe. The number of medication abortions have also increased. What could be the consequence of removing this kind of medication from the market?
It's just going to mean more living, breathing women are going to be paying with their lives, especially women of color and low-income women. A lot of times women are not aware of their pregnancy until much later. And of course, in America, we have a lot of different kinds of policy issues that the rest of, industrialized countries don't have to deal with, such as lack of paid leave, lack of paid parental leave, maternity leave. So it's incredibly important that we see this as a women's health issue, but also a family issue and an economic issue.
How should reproductive rights advocates be thinking about a landscape where mifepristone is harder to get a hold of? I mean, this is something that we're going to be exploring even further after we get this ruling from the Supreme Court sometime down the line. But how exactly should advocates be thinking about the landscape as it might be after this Supreme Court case?
Well, the landscape in the world's richest democracy, the United States, for women to be able to access a full range of reproductive health services is already quite challenging. And this Supreme Court case is just going to make it that much more difficult to get your hands on mifepristone. It won't make it impossible, but women will now, instead of being able to order it online or through telemedicine services, they will have to go to a clinic and get the pills. So it's just that added commute, the added drive, the added distance, the added complications, and just one more barrier between women and healthcare. And it just goes to show that the people who are anti-women's choice will not stop until there's a nationwide ban on abortion.
Anushay Hossain, women's health researcher and women's rights advocate, thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for those of you watching at home, Anushay's new podcast, The Pain Gap, comes out tomorrow. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. With so many questions and concerns still in the air, many want to know, how exactly does the abortion pill work? Science and health correspondent Lindsay Thies gives us a closer look at the specifics.
We wanted to take a straightforward look at mifepristone, one of the drugs behind medicated abortion. We spoke with two practicing OBGYNs for this story about how the drug works for medicated abortion, as well as how it's used for other health problems. Mifepristone is one of two medications the FDA has approved to be taken together, one after another, for a medicated abortion. Mifepristone is a one-dose pill only approved for patients up to 10 weeks pregnant or 70 days. The drug impacts progesterone, a key hormone in menstruation and pregnancy. Progesterone helps the uterus grow during pregnancy and keeps it from having contractions. Mifepristone is something called a selective progesterone receptor modulator.
And what that means is that it binds to the receptor, the progesterone receptor, a little bit more than the actual progesterone does, and therefore it blocks progesterone from attaching to the receptor.
The second drug in the process is misoprostol. It's usually taken 24 to 72 hours after mifepristone. The drug is also used to get rid of stomach ulcers, and for medicated abortion, misoprostol is used to cause contractions and bleeding, which empty the uterus. If mifepristone is not available, a patient could take multiple doses of misoprostol. The World Health Organization recommends it, but experts warn misoprostol does not work as well alone, has side effects, and taking more can make them worse.
Can make you feel achy, even cause a low-grade fever, cause nausea, and some GI distress.
Someone who's on long-term systemic steroids, someone with chronic adrenal failure or is on blood thinners or has a blood clotting problem, or someone who has very severe anemia, they probably wouldn't be the best candidates for a medication abortion.
I would want to make sure that you don't have an IUD in place, that you're certain of when your last menstrual period was, that you don't have any hemorrhagic or bleeding disorders, and any known allergy to the medications.
According to the Guttmacher Institute, which advocates for abortion rights, 98% of medication abortions in the United States in 2020 used a regimen that included mifepristone. As for safety, a 2022 Scripps News investigation found that for every 1 million patients who used the drug, 6.5 patients died. The death rate for penicillin is 4 times higher. Doctors use mifepristone for things other than medicated abortion. The doctors that we spoke with for this story say it is also used to help a patient pass a miscarriage or induce labor for a stillborn. Research shows that mifepristone has also been used for certain patients with Cushing's syndrome. That's a disorder where the body makes too much of the stress hormone cortisol for a very long period of time. Mifepristone has also been used for something called uterine fibroids. They are non-cancerous growths, and they can be very painful. The Mayo Clinic says about 75 to 80% of people with a uterus will have fibroids at some point in their lives. Lindsay Thies, Scripps News, San Francisco.
Former President Donald Trump has another day in court, 2 of them, in fact. Up next, details on the reprieve he won in one case and the setback in another.